What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
We apologize in advance for the occasional slip of the term anti-radar. It is correct to say radar detector and no other way. But nevertheless, anti-radar long ago took root in the people, and in general everyone understands what it means. Our questions were answered by the founder of the largest domestic site dedicated to radar detectors road forum. R.U. Vladimir, known under the nickname Mono, as well as a team of forum experts. Kolesa. R.U. Actually, what in terms of technology and techniques in the segment of radar detectors has brought not so long gone from us the year 2020? What brands and models were marked by significant innovations? Where is the development of this segment of consumer electronics going today? Vladimir. Absolutely nothing new was brought either last year or the previous year. Because of the lack of money and the dollar exchange rate. Everything that is used and sold on our market today, all these developments are at least 7 years old, including signature detection, as the most effective method of minimizing false alarms to this day, and LNA receivers, low noise amplifier, necessary due to the relatively massive spread of low-noise mobile radars such as Cordon M2 and SKATP. Games with external design, construction of different hybrids and other similar things should not be taken into account. Some development can be seen in the North American market, where quite advanced modern models appear, Escort with Redline 360C, Uniden R7 and Valentine 1 Gen 2. Plus we are very close to the appearance of a radar detector of a completely new generation in the form of Radensothea. This is a radar detector that uses artificial intelligence, AI, and deep machine learning, DML, principles to classify radiation types. In essence, it is also a kind of signature radar detector, but with a completely different quality of capabilities. First of all, it concerns the processor power, 1.5 GHz quad-core, which, according to the developer's claims, allows to identify the received signal with 100% accuracy and at least forget about the existence of such things as false positives, regardless of their source. I wonder how it will work in practice, but tentatively everything looks promising. The system is open source and therefore has the potential to be adapted to any environment. What technological innovations have the enemy got? New types of radars, cameras, new bands, new modulations, etc. All the things that anti-radars are supposed to counteract? Question of those that have appeared in recent years, a candidate for the title of serious problem can be called only Mobile Complex Auto NOM, which measures speed without radar radiation, on the principle of analyzing video images. The principle of action, like the well-known stationary Auto Hurricane, but mobile. The good news for us is that it has not yet been released on the roads. Let's try to compile a kind of timeline of the evolution of the radar detector segment over the entire period of its existence. In our country, focusing on the fundamentally important and breakthrough functions that influence the efficiency of the devices. Question in the 90s and early noughties everything was in a rather embryonic state. On the part of the enemy there were only 2 radars, Sokol, by the way, these ancient radars are still used in Belarus. Kolesa, RU Note, and Iskra, and only in the single-target hunting variant. On the driver's side, at first, there were low-production domestic half-articles, then there appeared detectors of inexpensive American brands like Whistler and Cobra, with one or another success. By the way, a curious episode of trade in homemade radar detectors is described in the detective book Brighton Beach Avenue by the famous Soviet Russian author, Major General of the Ministry of Internal Affairs Andrei Molchanov, published in 1990, and probably written even earlier. N-Rim. Kolesa. RU. At the time of launching the Road Forum in 2009, where users interested in the topic began to systematically accumulate information and knowledge in one place, the RF market was almost exclusively consumer goods. In the low-budget segment there were manufacturers like those mentioned above. There was Xiaomi, which tried to do something on the basis of Chinese-Korean OEM, worked not very well, but was cheap. There were expensive American Valentine 1 and adapted for Europe Escort and Beltronics, which at that time worked exceptionally well, but cost $400 and were purchased mainly by enthusiasts of our forum, often not in Russian stores, and were brought piece by piece from abroad. Everything else that was on the market just didn't work well. I think the first one who seriously thought about adaptation for our radars was the Russian Representative Office of Cobra, and they. Beginning of 2010 can be considered the starting point of conscious work with firmware directly aimed at the Russian market. In the same 2010, the first Strelka radars with extremely complex radiation, unlike anything previously known, appeared on the roads. About a year later, a working scheme of Strelka detection was first publicized on our forum by a forum member under the nickname DED. And by the end of 2012 this scheme was implemented by Supra in a full production cycle. In the following year, 2013, this scheme was implemented by all major brands on the market with varying degrees of success. In fact, it was the first of its kind signature-based implementation of individual radar detection at the hardware level. Here the idea of the solution was suggested by the problem itself. In the same 13th year, Inspector brand brings to the market the first full-fledged combo device with high-quality video fixation and working radar part, after which this format was picked up by all others. And in the same year, the distributor of Escort under the brand Street Storm brings to the market its device with LNA amplifier. In general, this can be called the period of the most rapid growth of this market. Already by inertia at the beginning of the 16th year come to the market Signature Supra, processing samples at the hardware level, and borrowed from them the idea plane, but realized them by productive method at the software level, actually, which is used by all signatures today. In general, already at that stage it became clear that a full-fledged signature device, devoid of all the understandable problems, cannot be cheaper than $300 to $400, with the most massive size of the speed penalty of 250 rubles. We can put a point on it. There are a lot of settings in a modern radar detector. Not only banal on off ranges, but also sensitivity, switching on, switching off and adjusting different filters and amplifiers, etc. Does it make sense for an ordinary consumer driver to delve into them? Or do most devices work optimally on boxed settings? Question nowadays, as a rule, self-respecting brands set the optimal settings out of the box. Plus, most devices have GPS and can work in automatic mode. That is, they adjust sensitivity and notification algorithms depending on speed. Sensitivity modes can change, but, in general, this is only a degree of software processing. Weak signals are simply not displayed. On city modes, or the detector can be configured so that it muffles the sound up to a certain speed. Rather, these settings are to create convenience, as everyone has their own habits, manner of driving, areas of movement. Whether it makes sense to go into it or not depends entirely on the user and his experience with the radar detector. I would recommend to use pure highway modes or modes of maximum sensitivity without muting, without automatics. This will at least give some experience and understanding of the device operation, and at the same time protect from unnecessary expenses. If you don't want to get into it at all, you should at least check the enabled ranges and disable the unnecessary ones. In Russia, we are interested in the K-band and nothing else. Microwave blind spot sensors, BMZ, have been spreading rapidly lately. Once they were a sign of premium cars only, today they have penetrated into the middle segment, and the Chinese in basements are already making penny universal kits that can be put even on old Jiguli. How successfully their signals are recognized and filtered by radar detectors, and hasn't the spread of DMZ systems created interference problems for them? Question: at this stage of development, radar detectors are good enough to filter DMZ signals so that they are not mistaken for speed radars. There are no fundamental difficulties in DMZ filtering if there is a corresponding signature in the firmware. The VW Touareg signature is an exception. The problem is different. Modern radar detectors cannot process several signals simultaneously. They are all single channel and use inexpensive slow processors. And if we have a strong enough background from DMZ at the input, the detector can see it and filter it, but it will not see the weak signal of the real radar behind it. Some car manufacturers, due to the nuances of licensing of DMZ ranges in Russia, went the way of reducing the duration of probing pulses. The result: American detectors cut them off, and our, more precisely, a part of Korean Chinese, reacts with false signals of Strelka. But, in fact, the problem here lies not in the plane of signature filtering, but in the quality of the receiving path, electronic components of the receiving path and shielding. Another sign of the times, heated windshields, which used to be a cool exotic, but today have penetrated even the most budget segment. Do they affect the range of radar signal reception by a radar detector? Question: it's simple. No. Even a dense grid of threads is not an obstacle for radio signals with frequencies on which radars work. You can not worry. K. What is the average range of a radar detector that a buyer might look to for understanding? Most people deal with only one instance and one model that they have personally, and they have nothing to compare it with. And they take the performance of the device as a given, but in fact a person may not even know that the device works badly, because of a defect, some peculiarities of installation, etc. Question: when assessing can be guided by such data, given for several common and popular devices and common radars from among the quiet. That is, whose signal is not detected from afar. Model cordon M2 in the back, cordon M2 in the front, SKATP in the back, SKATP in the forehead. Show me G800, sign. 320M 950M 45M 520M Silverstone Sorchi Z, alarm. 190M 1015M 45M 470M Inspector SCATSI 225M 965M 40M 245M Inspector SCAT. SE 350M 1050M 135M 840M Escort 9509 International 350M 1050M 50M 245M. All runs on SCAT only in non-signature modes. K. How long does a modern detector last? Not in terms of physical wear and tear, but in terms of technological obsolescence. How long can the manufacturer keep the device up to date with firmware updates until it becomes really useless? Question: let's take the same Neoline 7500s, which has been in production since 2017. It is still up to date, but it has not been updated for more than a year, due to which there are some problems with the new dead zone sensors, DMZ. And, according to the Service Update Service, conquerors of 11 to 12 years of release, models A868 and A740, 899 plus, and their numerous clones, are still being actively updated. But in general, everything depends on the financial stability of the company. As long as there are some sales, there will be support. If the activity is curtailed, the support stops. Of course, foreign manufacturers are more reliable here than Russian OEMs. However, with Americans there are a lot of problems with both adaptation and support. K. Radar detectors for hidden installation. What about this segment? Is it developing or stagnating? To what extent are such systems represented on the Russian market, and to what extent are they in demand? Question: the market is developing at the expense of the States and Canada. An interesting model is the Escort Max 360 Ci. I would also include the most correct laser jammers, anti-laser priority. According to our concepts, they cost crazy money, but they are relevant. In Russia, in fact, sold only wired Neoline S300 and wireless R750. Also Silverstone's CR-Bot came out, but the results on it will be only in summer. In any case, this is a micromarket. If devices are released, they are poorly supported. And they are mainly taken only by those who have a thermal glass or interference-generating DMZs in the mirrors. K. How does the detector market in Russia look today? Are sales growing or declining? How intensively are new brands appearing and what is their origin? B. Comparing the market as it was in 11 to 13 years purely in terms of the number of brands and models, I would say that it has decreased. By a factor of 2 at least. Which, in principle, correlates quite well with the dollar exchange rate. There are no new brands, the strongest brands remain. This is consolidation. After the departure of a group of leading engineers from Supra, who several years ago were engaged in quite serious hardware and software development, by and large, the entire Russian market is a resale of Chinese-Korean OEM with varying degrees of success in adapting it to our realities, which depends entirely on the person or group of people who are engaged in promoting a particular brand. Question: what can you say about the legislation banning radar detectors in a number of countries? Is there a tendency to liberalize this topic, or on the contrary, they are tightening the screws? Question: there are no changes. Europe is stably against it. America is stably not against it. In general, drivers in Europe face heavy fines for use, but there are almost only a handful of users. And from my own experience of driving in Germany and Italy, I can say that there are no reasons for exceeding the limit. There are honest signs in front of cameras. Highways there, as a rule, do not pass through settlements, and there are no empty wide roads with unreasonable signs 40, as it often happens in our country. At the same time, there are also such extremes as the prohibition of GPS informers about stationary radars, which we have long been the order of the day in any combo device, and in any smartphone with a navigator, and in a mass of specialized free and paid applications. In Germany, for example, it is formally forbidden for drivers. And the DVRs and combo devices sold there have special regional firmware without GPS alerting functionality. As for the Russian Federation, I don't think we will see a ban on radar detectors in the current coordinate system. The earnings of camera installers and regional authorities are practically unaffected, and it is extremely difficult to ban and control. Detectors. In conclusion, the evolution of anti-radar technologies presents both significant advancements and complex challenges within the context of Russia. As we have explored, the integration of these systems into military strategies raises critical questions about effectiveness, ethical implications, and international relations. The potential for a ban on such technologies could reshape the landscape of defense and security, prompting a re-evaluation of existing policies and strategies. As we move forward, it is essential to balance innovation with responsibility, ensuring that technological progress does not compromise global stability. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of anti-radars and their implications for the future.